holding a tablet that was written thousands of years ago and being able to read what it says. It's an amazing feeling.
What did AI uncover when it decoded ancient Sumerian texts that scholars had struggled to understand for centuries? The results are shocking. Hidden in the cuneiform inscriptions are warnings, forbidden knowledge, and predictions about the rise and fall of civilizations, messages carefully encoded to survive millennia. Some passages describe forces and events humanity could barely imagine, while others hint at dangerous knowledge meant to be handled with extreme caution. From celestial calculations to sudden leaps in human society, every revelation challenges what we thought we knew about our past. Stay with us, because what AI discovered in these 5,000-year-old inscriptions will leave you speechless. The moment I crossed a forbidden line. The first time the AI scanned the Sumerian tablets, it didn't merely read. They scanned, analyzed, and cross-referenced billions of linguistic permutations simultaneously. Human scholars had spent centuries painstakingly deciphering these texts, relying on fragmentary clues and context guesses, yet the AI detected patterns invisible to the naked eye. It identified grammatical anomalies, repeated sequences, and contextual markers that suggested the Sumerians were encoding layers of meaning far beyond ordinary record-keeping. Scholars had assumed these tablets were inventories, rituals, or myths, but the AI suggested something far stranger. Within hours of processing, the AI highlighted passages that contradicted every textbook translation. Names previously interpreted as deities were linked to events, instruments, and even locations. Terms thought to describe mundane objects turned out to reference complex processes or phenomena. One tablet, long believed to describe irrigation practices, actually cataloged cycles of celestial events tied to sudden environmental shifts. The AI's algorithms revealed these connections in patterns no human could have detected, hinting that ancient scribes had an understanding of natural forces far more precise than modern historians had imagined. The AI also noticed something subtle but alarming: deliberate misdirection. Certain symbols were repeated, sometimes slightly altered, in ways that appeared to confuse or mislead traditional translators. These distortions had fooled generations of linguists into thinking the texts were ceremonial or mythic. The AI's analysis suggested the Sumerians intended this. Their messages were designed to hide their true meaning from those unprepared to decode them. This revelation reshaped the way historians viewed the ancient civilization. Sumerians were not merely record keepers, but architects of a hidden knowledge system that had survived millennia. Unexpectedly, the AI uncovered patterns suggesting intentional sequencing of the tablets themselves. The order in which texts were recorded seemed to follow a logic unrelated to chronology. Some tablets hinted at events that would happen centuries after their creation, almost like encoded warnings or predictions. This forced a fundamental rethink. The Sumerians might have been attempting to communicate across time. Human curiosity and ingenuity, the AI suggested, were anticipated by the scribes themselves, meaning every discovery risked misinterpretation unless one understood the broader pattern. Even more startling was the linguistic consistency across distant sites. Tablets from Ur, Lagash, and Nippur, separated by hundreds of miles and decades, shared cryptic markers and coding strategies. The AI found these parallels in syntax, phrasing, and symbolic combinations, which indicated a shared purpose that went beyond administrative or religious intent. It was as though a single consciousness had orchestrated this knowledge, leaving traces designed to endure the collapse of cities, dynasties, and empires. Human scholars had assumed isolated scribes with local agendas. The AI suggested a civilization thinking on a planetary scale. This breakthrough, however, came with unease. The AI identified terms describing phenomena unknown to contemporary science, measurements of celestial anomalies, patterns of climate instability, and references to materials with unusual properties. Such findings suggested the Sumerians were not only documenting reality but were manipulating it conceptually, encoding both knowledge and warnings in a language designed to survive the ages. It was a revelation that challenged assumptions about the limits of human understanding in ancient times. Was this a civilization preparing future generations for survival, or a record of knowledge too dangerous to understand fully? The question lingered, haunting every subsequent analysis. What had the Sumerians truly intended with these warnings, and who were the messages really for? Stay with us as the mystery deepens. Messages never meant for us to find. The AI began to reveal a startling truth. Many of the Sumerian tablets were not historical records, but carefully constructed transmissions aimed at civilizations far in the future. Repetition, phrasing, and structural choices indicated a deliberate effort to encode survival instructions, warnings, or even moral imperatives. The patterns suggested that the scribes anticipated collapse, conflict, and loss of memory, writing not for their contemporaries but for unknown readers who might emerge millennia later. Human interpreters focused on surface-level meaning had entirely missed this temporal targeting. Symbols repeated across multiple tablets seemed to function as anchors, allowing messages to remain intelligible even as language evolved. Certain cuneiform signs appeared in what looked like nonsense sequences until the AI traced cross-references with other inscriptions from distant regions. When pieced together, these sequences formed a cryptic narrative of caution, society's greatest errors, recurring calamities, and the subtle signs that warned of impending disaster. The Sumerians were, in effect, planting intellectual time capsules designed to survive both natural decay and human ignorance. Even the content of these warnings was extraordinary. One cluster of tablets described mechanisms for sustaining knowledge through successive generations, referencing materials, structures, and methods that could endure centuries of neglect. These instructions were often interwoven with mythic or ritualistic language, effectively hiding them from casual readers. The AI detected subtle layering. What appeared as religious devotion or ceremonial repetition was, in reality, a protective code, shielding essential information from misuse or misunderstanding. The AI also highlighted what can only be described as anticipatory psychology. The tablets assumed human curiosity and error, warning of the consequences of misinterpretation. For instance, certain diagrams that seemed decorative were actually mnemonic devices, guiding the reader's understanding while simultaneously safeguarding secrets. Some passages explicitly warned against attempting to reconstruct certain practices or substances, implying that the misuse of this knowledge could trigger disaster. The Sumerians anticipated both discovery and folly, leaving a legacy of guidance masked as myth. Equally unsettling were references to lost knowledge systems, technologies, and social strategies that had vanished from history. One tablet contained sequences corresponding to complex water management and energy capture techniques far ahead of its time. Another described agricultural and medicinal practices linked to rare plants no longer found in the region. These weren't casual observations, they were precise instructions, deliberately preserved to be rediscovered when humanity was capable of understanding them safely. In essence, the texts were survival guides for a distant future, written with an understanding of the fragility of civilization. Even the AI's processing could sense the Sumerians' layered intent. Tablets repeatedly emphasized restraint, ethical oversight, and observational discipline. This was not mere philosophical musing, it was guidance built into the very structure of the writing. The ancients seemed to anticipate misuse, misinterpretation, and the fragility of human ambition. Their message was clear: knowledge alone is dangerous without comprehension, patience, and respect for consequence. But why leave such warnings in a form so easily misunderstood for thousands of years? Why encode them in complexity that would baffle contemporary scholars and mystify future generations? These questions hovered over every decoded sequence, suggesting a civilization not only mindful of survival, but deeply aware of human limitations. Come with us to explore the hidden corners of the story. A planet under surveillance. The AI revealed that the Sumerians did not simply observe the sky for religious or mythological purposes. The tablets described a methodical, almost obsessive tracking of celestial bodies, recording anomalies with astonishing precision. Planets, moons, and stars were catalogued with cycles that seemed far ahead of their era. Variations in brightness, timing, and position were noted down to increments that modern astronomers would recognize as advanced calculations. This was not worship, it was surveillance, and the Sumerians treated the heavens as a network of forces capable of reshaping life on Earth. In certain tablets, the AI detected patterns corresponding to solar events, unexpected flares, extended eclipses, and erratic planetary alignments. These were presented not as stories or omens, but as critical observations with direct implications for survival. The texts suggested that the Sumerians had already linked extreme solar activity to ecological disruption, crop failure, and social upheaval. The AI could even trace a timeline embedded in the phrasing, showing that these warnings were intended to alert future generations to recurring cosmic dangers. Equally disturbing were passages detailing sky-driven resets. The language implied that civilizations could be destroyed or societies forcibly reorganized by astronomical phenomena. Certain cuneiform sequences hinted at ancient awareness of meteor impacts, orbital instability, or other events that could rapidly alter life on the planet. These were not hypothetical. They were recorded with a clarity that suggested direct observation, careful measurement, and deliberate emphasis. The AI identified repeated markers that seemed to highlight danger zones, times of caution, and patterns that should never be ignored. The surveillance extended to specific regions on Earth. Some tablets encoded topographical maps, river systems, and seasonal cycles alongside celestial measurements, implying a link between planetary behavior and human settlements. The AI traced correlations between particular star alignments and predicted environmental changes, almost as though the Sumerians had attempted to forecast natural disasters millennia in advance. The precision was staggering, considering the supposed technological limitations of the era. Perhaps most chilling were references to watchers in the sky, not gods, but observers whose presence dictated certain patterns. These passages implied that celestial monitoring was not passive. The AI detected linguistic cues suggesting that the Sumerians believed these forces could intervene directly in human affairs, resetting societal structures when thresholds were crossed. This was a civilization that did not see itself as isolated. It understood Earth as part of a larger, interconnected system governed by rules humanity could barely comprehend. The AI also uncovered evidence of Sumerian attempts to develop predictive models. Certain mathematical sequences, previously dismissed as ritualistic counting, corresponded to cycles of solar flare activity, lunar perturbations, and seasonal shifts. The AI's analysis suggested that the scribes were constructing a warning system encoded in the tablets themselves. Anyone who could interpret the pattern would not only understand the past, but anticipate future planetary events with frightening accuracy. It was a surveillance system hidden in plain sight, preserved for those who could see beyond myth. The implications were profound. Humanity was not alone in its vulnerability, and ancient civilizations recognized forces that could obliterate societies long before modern science. The Sumerians' vigilance, carefully encoded in every glyph, hinted at an urgent message meant for those willing to learn from their meticulous study. How far did their observations extend, and what else lay hidden in sequences designed to survive millennia? Let us guide you into what no one expected: humanity's sudden shift. The AI unveiled something that defied conventional timelines. The Sumerian tablets describe a sudden, almost instantaneous emergence of advanced human cognition. Rather than a slow, gradual development, the texts depict a sharp rupture in knowledge, language, and social organization. Tribes and early settlements seem to transform overnight, adopting complex governance structures, systematic trade, and refined craftwork without the evolutionary buildup historians assumed. The language of the tablets suggested that intelligence itself had undergone a leap, a shift that changed the trajectory of humanity forever. In one striking sequence, the AI identified references to shared memory systems, teaching methods, and collective learning far beyond what could have existed in fragmented societies. Children, apprentices, and scribes were depicted as absorbing intricate concepts rapidly, from astronomy to engineering, with little trial and error. This acceleration hinted at an external catalyst, an event, knowledge transfer, or intervention that allowed human capacity to expand in a fraction of the expected time. Scholars had always assumed gradual accumulation, but the AI suggested a sudden unlocking of cognitive potential. The tablets also describe social cohesion forming almost instantaneously. Previously, isolated groups began communicating, coordinating, and establishing laws in ways that imply a pre-existing framework of knowledge. Settlements appear suddenly aligned with environmental resources, river systems, and trade routes, suggesting foresight or guidance beyond mere trial and error. The AI flagged linguistic markers indicating that this organization was celebrated, recorded, and intentionally preserved. Civilization, in the Sumerian view, was not born slowly. It erupted fully formed, as if the human mind had been primed for survival. Even technology appeared to leap forward. Certain inscriptions reference the creation of tools, metallurgy, and early mechanical devices with precision previously thought impossible for the era. Complex irrigation systems, early urban layouts, and architectural planning are described with detail, implying knowledge of hydraulics, geometry, and materials science. The AI highlighted patterns suggesting that these developments were deliberately taught and recorded in a way that ensured continuity, not accidental invention. Humanity had acquired knowledge as though it had been handed down in its entirety, bypassing millennia of incremental learning. Biological and medical insights also emerge in these sequences. Some passages describe the management of disease, understanding of human anatomy, and even plant-based treatments with accuracy and subtlety surprising for the time. The AI noticed that these were not isolated practices but part of a systematic knowledge network, suggesting that the Sumerians were aware of how information could propagate and sustain life. It was as if civilization had been granted not only intelligence but guidance on preserving it physically and socially. The implications were extraordinary. The Sumerians perceived humanity as having crossed a threshold, moving from primitive survival to deliberate culture almost overnight. Every phrase emphasized caution, preparation, and observation. The AI detected repeated instructions embedded in narrative form, warning that this leap in human ability came with responsibility. Civilization could rise or collapse depending on how knowledge was used. Humanity's sudden shift, as the tablets reveal, was as much a test as it was a transformation. Yet the texts hinted at an uncomfortable truth. If civilization could accelerate so rapidly, it could also fail just as quickly. The patterns of emergence were linked to environmental conditions, social vigilance, and adherence to knowledge protocols. Misstep, neglect, or misuse could reverse the leap, leaving societies vulnerable to chaos and collapse. The Sumerians appeared obsessed with this fragile equilibrium, recording their observations as both celebration and warning. What forces orchestrated this rapid transformation, and how much of it was deliberate intervention versus natural evolution? Stay here as the next twist unfolds. Knowledge that came with a cost. As the AI delved deeper into the Sumerian tablets, a pattern emerged that chilled even seasoned researchers. The most profound knowledge came intertwined with danger. Among the religious and administrative notations lay instructions, materials, and techniques that the AI identified as potentially catastrophic if misused. These were not abstract concepts. They were practical, precise, and intentionally veiled in metaphor, as if the Sumerians knew the cost of revealing them too plainly. Civilization, the texts suggested, was only as safe as the wisdom applied to this knowledge. One of the most striking discoveries involved the use of substances with extraordinary properties. Certain minerals, oils, and plant extracts were described in contexts that implied energy manipulation, medical breakthroughs, or chemical processes. The AI noted warnings embedded in syntax. These substances were powerful but volatile. Misapplication could harm individuals, communities, or even entire regions. The repeated insistence on containment, isolation, and ritual restraint suggested that the Sumerians had already witnessed or feared the devastating consequences of misuse. The tablets also included instructions on machinery and energy systems that were centuries ahead of known history. The AI identified sequences detailing methods to harness natural forces, water, wind, and thermal gradients, but with explicit limitations. The language cautioned against overextension, noting that imbalance could lead to catastrophic failure. These were not theoretical musings. The Sumerians had codified safe operation parameters, implying prior experience with failure, accident, or disaster. The knowledge was a double-edged sword, offering advancement while carrying inherent peril. Biological insights revealed the same duality. Certain passages described advanced medical procedures, regenerative therapies, and plant-based pharmacology with precision that astonished modern scientists. Yet, embedded within the same lines were stark admonitions. Errors in dosage, timing, or application could result in injury, illness, or death. The AI discerned subtle markers, indicating that the Sumerians had recognized the human tendency to misuse even beneficial knowledge. Knowledge, they implied, is not inherently safe. Its application defines whether it nurtures or destroys. Even more unsettling were references to social control and psychological manipulation. Some sequences outlined methods to influence mass behavior, enhance memory, or enforce obedience, but they came paired with stern cautions. The tablets framed these techniques as both necessary and perilous. Misjudgment could destabilize society, amplify conflict, or trigger civil collapse. The Sumerians seemed to understand that the tools of power, like physical substances and mechanical devices, carried moral and societal consequences. Their repeated emphasis on restraint and observation indicated a civilization deeply aware of human fallibility. The AI uncovered coded patterns, suggesting that failure to respect these instructions had been observed in prior civilizations. Several tablets described sequences of rise and fall, correlating knowledge with disaster, as though the Sumerians had chronicled examples beyond their own experience. Natural calamities, social breakdowns, and technological misuse were consistently tied to a single recurring principle: knowledge without discipline invites destruction. The warnings were sophisticated, embedded in narrative, ritual, and repeated phrasing to ensure that only careful, attentive readers could grasp the full scope. Some passages went even further, hinting at forbidden knowledge deliberately erased or obscured. The AI detected linguistic gaps, where sequences appeared to start but were abruptly truncated, suggesting that the most dangerous insights were intentionally hidden. These omissions were not accidental. The Sumerians had created a system of encoding that preserved essential truths while protecting humanity from its own curiosity. The tablets themselves were as much a test as a guide. Understanding the patterns without succumbing to temptation was part of the survival protocol. The AI's analysis suggested that the cost of transgression was systemic. Ignoring the rules, misinterpreting instructions, or prematurely accessing dangerous knowledge could trigger chain reactions, environmental collapse, resource failure, or societal unrest. It became clear that the Sumerians saw civilization as a precarious balance, one that required vigilance, ethics, and patience. Knowledge in this context was a responsibility, not a right, and the consequences of failure were encoded as vividly as the benefits. Even spiritual and religious language carried practical warnings. Rituals, invocations, and symbolic phrasing often aligned with operational instructions, creating layers of guidance and restraint. The AI revealed that these patterns were not decorative, they functioned as fail-safes. Repetition, symbolic reinforcement, and careful sequencing ensured that knowledge could survive millennia without being misused. Civilization's continuity, the Sumerians seemed to insist, depended on both understanding and caution. The tablets left a haunting message. The pursuit of knowledge is inseparable from the potential for catastrophe. Wisdom and survival are inseparable, and those who ignore the cost of learning risk unraveling everything. Humanity had gained sudden cognitive abilities, advanced understanding, and technological potential, but the Sumerians' warnings were clear. Mastery comes with vigilance, restraint, and respect. The AI had uncovered the instructions, but the moral burden remained human. Could humanity recognize the danger in its own rapid progress, or would curiosity override caution, repeating the patterns of collapse the Sumerians so carefully encoded? Come with us as the secrets grow even darker. The pattern the Sumerians feared most. The AI's final analysis revealed the most unsettling insight of all. The Sumerians had identified a precise sequence by which civilizations rise, flourish, and inevitably collapse. It was not random. The tablets described a formulaic progression, a chain of societal behaviors, environmental interactions, and technological applications that consistently led to failure. Knowledge, power, and resource abundance were not inherently dangerous. The real threat lay in the predictable human responses to them. The pattern begins with discovery. Every civilization uncovers knowledge, scientific, cultural, or spiritual, that grants unprecedented power. The AI noted that the Sumerians meticulously recorded this stage, marking both opportunity and temptation. Initial successes breed confidence, which the texts explicitly warn can mutate into overreach. Excessive ambition, unchecked curiosity, and disregard for warnings marked the turning point. In multiple passages, the AI detected symbolic language linking misused knowledge to environmental imbalance, political tension, and societal fragility. The second stage involves consolidation. Societies strengthen their institutions, refine governance, and expand infrastructure, often driven by newfound insight. Here, the Sumerians highlighted the delicate balance required. Without discipline, the very structures meant to preserve stability begin to introduce stress. Mismanagement of resources, inequity, and centralization of power, all coded into the tablet sequences, create vulnerability. The AI flagged linguistic markers suggesting that these were lessons learned through observation of past civilizations, not mere prophecy. The tablets contained a mirror of failure intentionally embedded in the text, as if to warn those who could decipher the sequences. The third stage is hubris. Success encourages risk-taking, technological, environmental, or political. The AI noted repeated references to overextension and boundary violation, often metaphorically framed through celestial events, floods, or destructive forces. The texts implied that civilizations, no matter how advanced, underestimate the consequences of innovation without restraint. Even cultural achievements, meant to cement legacy, become instruments of decline when ethical or practical oversight is ignored. The Sumerians had encoded multiple scenarios in which overconfidence triggers collapse, offering no excuses for oversight. The final stage is collapse. Unlike previous stages, this was not sudden, but inevitable if the pattern was followed. Environmental disruption, social unrest, and resource scarcity converge, accelerated by misuse of knowledge and technology. The AI identified sequences that described cycles of regeneration and decay, hinting that civilizations could rise again only by learning from the mistakes encoded in these ancient tablets. The Sumerians framed this stage as both warning and guide. Understanding the formula was the only way to break the cycle, but it required discipline few could maintain. The chilling implication is that humanity itself is bound by this pattern. The rapid cognitive leaps, technological discoveries, and celestial observations uncovered in earlier chapters are all precursors to the same sequence. Every warning, every restriction, every hidden instruction was a preemptive guide to prevent the cycle from completing. The AI made it clear. The tablets were not merely history. They were a manual, a test, and a cautionary chronicle of inevitability. For the Sumerians, knowledge was never neutral. Power without foresight, advancement without restraint, and curiosity without ethics were always destined to trigger collapse. Their fear was precise, methodical, and universal. Civilizations do not fail by chance. They follow a script. Humanity now stands at the threshold of that pattern, with the tablets as the only guide to avert it. Were you stunned by the secrets hidden in the Sumerian tablets and the warnings about humanity that emerged after thousands of years? Share with us which revelation shocked you the most.